Get the whole Young Turks 3-hour show by going to theyoungturks.com. If you become a member, you get the whole show, plus a very fun post-game show as well. See you there. Well, the Young Turks, we of course have an exciting week ahead for you guys. Exciting show today, exciting shows throughout the week. I'm not saying anything yet, but it is possible that later this week we could have on Joseph Stiglitz and Elliot Spitzer. I haven't said a word. Okay. Now, today, look, probably the biggest news is Ben Bernanke and what's happening with that and the struggle back and forth on that. I tweeted about that over the weekend. I got a lot more for you guys on that today. We'll tell you who are the good guys, who's on his side, who's against him, and the political implications. We're going to get to that in a little bit. Then, of course, where's the healthcare reform battle? We're going to talk about that. Of course, people urging the president to go to the right and appease Republicans more. Who's shocked by that? No one. And some saying, no, stay strong. And we'll have a guest on who worked in the Clinton White House who's going to come and tell us not only the policy reasons, but the political reasons behind why staying strong makes sense. And then, of course, we'll give you all the people who want to stay, cream puff soft as usual on the Democratic side. So all of that's coming up. But one more thing that's coming up that's related to our first story. Glenn Beck on Friday ran this documentary, and we're going to have a guest on to talk about it. We're going to show you a little preview of the documentary, a summary, if you will. And he's taken it on the stereo of Spinal Tap to 11, okay? If you thought he was hideous before, wait till you get a load of this. And there's a concerted effort here to... Look, I don't know why I hesitate when they don't hesitate at all, right? But honestly, it appears to me two things are afoot here. And we're going to talk about it more in the second hour, okay? But one is to paint progressives as Nazis, okay, and people who commit genocide, and to make progressive as dirty a word as they made liberal. Okay, that's clear. That's coming up. I'm going to explain it. The second part of it is a little bit more controversial, but it seems to me fairly clear from all that they're saying that they want someone to desperately to commit an act of violence against the president. They can't, and against almost all the progressives. I mean, they're egging people on. They're egging them on. Oh, if you don't act, these guys are like Hitler, and they're going to kill everybody, okay? And the list goes on and on, okay? So it's mind-blowing. And we're going to get to that, maybe some portion of it in this hour, but definitely with a guest in the second hour, okay? Now, I say that as a prelude to our first story because the more you see this develop, the more crystal clear it is who the good guys and the bad guys in American politics are. I mean, nothing's ever been clearer. I mean, it seems, a little comical to put it that way. It's black and white. That's the kind of thing the conservatives do. And if you'd shown, me this, without having seen all this unfold, if you told me even a couple of years back, but certainly, 5 years back, 10 years back, that people would paint things in such a way. I said, come on, man. I'm not George W. Bush. We do nuance, right? But these guys on the right, I mean, they don't care about you. They don't care about the American people. And they don't really care about the American electoral process. If they lose by elections, it appears that they are perfectly ready to go to violence. All right, now, along the first lines, let's start with our first story. You remember Mark Sanford of the Appalachian Trail fame in South Carolina. Of course, the governor there, he winds up having a mistress, even though he was Mr. Family Values. He cries about how she's his soulmate, et cetera, et cetera. Well, look, it turns out there's at least some moral people in South Carolina because his lieutenant governor, Andre Bauer, says, hey, you know what, this is unacceptable, and he's got to go, okay? Now, we now have a recorded statement of Andre Bauer talking to some of his supporters at the Fountain Inn, and this included state lawmakers he was talking to and 115 residents, okay, at a town hall meeting. And, well, not what I would call the epitome of morality. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with sex or anything like that. This just gives you his worldview. Now, this recording, it starts out bad. The things that he's saying starts out bad. It gets further and further atrocious as he goes along. So let's listen in first. Clip number 11.
The fact that we continue to improve education cannot really be improved until we address the real problem. I can show you a bar graph where free and reduced lunch has the worst test scores in the state of South Carolina. You show me the school that has the highest free and reduced lunch, and I'll show you the worst test scores, folks. It's there, period. And so how do you fix it? Well, you say, look, if you receive goods or services from the government, then you owe something back. If you don't pay your taxes, do you think the government's going to come get you? They are. All of us. There's repercussions if we don't do certain things. If you receive goods and services from the government, there are no repercussions. We don't make you take a drug test. We ought to. We don't even make you show up to your child's parent-teacher conference meeting or to the PTA meeting. You go to a school where there's an active participation of parents, and guess what? They have the highest test scores. So what do? You say, look, folks, if you receive goods or services from the government and you don't attend the parent-teacher conference, bam, you lose your benefits. We're going to have to do things like that. We can't afford to keep just giving money away. My grandmother was not a highly educated woman, but she told me as a small child to quit feeding stray animals. You know why? Because they breed. You're facilitating the problem. If you give an animal or a person ample food supply, they will reproduce. Especially one that don't think too much further than that. And so what you've got to do is you've got to curtail that type of behavior. They don't know any better.
All right. All right. First, let's start with free and reduced lunches leads to the worst test scores. Now, that is not a causal connection, okay? Now, do they have the worst test scores? Yes. Could it be, Lieutenant Governor Bauer, that it's because they're under the worst socioeconomic conditions, and that's why they need free or reduced lunches? And that those socioeconomic conditions have, for time immemorial, led to worse test scores, unfortunately worse educational achievement, because they don't have a lot of opportunity. So now, what is your answer to that? Well, great, let's take away their free lunch. Yeah, that'll really help, okay? I can tell you from personal experience that being hungry does not lead to being able to concentrate better or to focus on your studies better, okay? By the way, do you know what percentage of South Carolina students get free or reduced lunch and participate in that program? It must be the minority riffraff, right? I mean, that was oozing from his message. 58% of students in South Carolina. So then that leads us to our second part. Lieutenant Bauer, you don't, Lieutenant Governor Bauer, I don't want to do him the service of calling him Lieutenant Bauer. You don't want to give 58% to all these people, and you don't want them to breed like stray animals, right? Because your grandmama taught you such lovely moral lessons, okay? So what, 58% of the people in South Carolina, they shouldn't get that, the students shouldn't, and their parents shouldn't be allowed to breed because they're not of your high caliber. Now, he says active participants, that parents who are active in their kids' lives lead to higher test scores. Absolutely true, okay? Now, but did you think, Mr. Bauer, that perhaps a person cannot attend a PTA meeting because they're poor and they've got 2 jobs, and that they can't make it to the PTA meeting because they're having trouble putting food on the table? Now, the reality is some are that way and some are not. I get that, man. I'm not trying to make heroes out of everybody. And do I wish that all the parents would participate in their kids' lives more? Absolutely, because that is the #1 indicator. Now, but the question isn't that. The question is, how do you get to that result? And is the best way to get to that result by punishing people, by taking away lunches from hungry kids, by taking away money from parents who are struggling to make it as it is and send their kids to school so they can get that education? Do you think that's the best way to do it? Well, of course, for right-wingers, punishment, judging other people, and apparently lacking all morality when it comes to understanding the plight of the poor, the middle class in this country. 58% of the students in South Carolina, they have no interest, none. Stray animals. I mean, my God, man, how pathetic and ridiculous can you be? Look, it is one thing to say we've got problems, and we do. It's another thing to try to address them legitimately. It's another third thing, what am I, Oral Roberts? To say to people, hey, listen, you know what? you're like animals to me, and I'm not going to let you breed by giving you money. I don't want to encourage you because I know how you are. And like we don't see the reference that he's making here. And the good people of South Carolina don't understand what he's talking about those people. And hey, look, let me ask him. Hey, Bauer, look, who are you referring to? Are you referring to all the poor white people in South Carolina, the poor black people, the poor Hispanic people, all the middle class? Is that who you're referring to? Please come out and tell me, hey, yeah, you know what? Middle class and poor in South Carolina got no interest in you. If you're a country club Republican, then I love you. And let's talk about how they're eating our money, these poor are, right? But the rest of you I don't give a damn about. Or do you mean just the black people in South Carolina? Because those are the kind of references that have been used against black people in the South for several hundred years now. And you're telling me, of course, you're naive about that and you have no idea, you never heard that before. And of course you didn't mean it about black people and that is not code words that you use in the South all the time. Okay, all right, then tell me that you mean it about 60% of your population. Which way is it? Either way, it's despicable. He's going to try to explain himself. There's a news report out of South Carolina. Now let's listen to this. A weasel try to get out of it. Clip number 12.
He says he stands by those remarks.
Conservation. That's what Lieutenant Governor Andre Bauer thought he would be asked about at Saturday's gubernatorial forum in Columbia. Instead, he spent part of the day defending a controversial comment. At a town hall meeting in Fountain Inn, Bauer compared the cycle of the government giving money to the poor without expecting anything in return to feeding stray animals, saying, quote, "You're facilitating the problem if you give an animal or person ample food supply."
There was no way that I was trying to tie animals to people.
Really?
What I was trying to talk about is a dependency culture. And that just like when you feed animals, you create a dependency.
You
According
idiot,
to the
you just did it
Associated
again.
Press, Bauer says poor parents of students who eat free or reduced price meals in school cafeterias should be required to attend parent-teacher conferences, or the students should go without.
Well, my solution is, if you receive goods and services from the government, you ought to have to attend a parent-teacher conference. You ought to have to attend a PTA meeting. I really think it's deplorable that people have made this so political, but that they don't have the backbone to give any answers or any ways to change this. Their answer is just keep funding it.
Yeah, okay, by the way, do you understand that? Do you understand how unbelievably stupid that is? So if you have a detached parent, the one that Bauer's talking about, okay? So let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say, oh, the parent's just sitting on his ass, right? And he or she won't go to a parent-teacher conference, and a kid gets a free or reduced lunch, right? So when the parent does not go because he's detached and doesn't give a damn, you punish the kid by taking away his lunch. Yeah, that's genius. That's genius. You know what that'll do? Here's what I'm sure it'll do. I'm sure it'll solve the problem in South Carolina. You know what? And those kids, well, when they go hungry, well, then they'll know. You know what? Maybe my parents should have showed up to a parent-teacher conference when they were detached in the first place. Or maybe they should quit their 2 jobs to show up to parent-teacher conferences. Either way. Look, again, the underlying problem is an important one. Study after study shows the more a parent is involved in a kid's life and their educational standing in their career, et cetera, the better the kid does. But there are positive ways to encourage that and negative, ridiculous, clownish ways to encourage that, as Lieutenant Governor Bauer is trying to indicate here. And one way not to do it is to compare their parents to animals, okay? Look, if you left it to me, I would study the issue and I'd say, I need my advisors to give me all the options, okay? Give me carrots, give me sticks. And I'm not close to the idea of incentives and disincentives, as anyone who's watched this show knows, okay? So, for example, one thing that occurs to me is do a public education campaign. Now, I know what the conservatives will say. Oh, yeah, a public education campaign. Yeah, that'll work. Yeah, spend more money on that. Yeah, whoa. First of all, we know it works. We did it with smoking, and the public education campaign against smoking in this country has worked miracles, okay? So can it work? Absolutely. So you educate parents, hey, every study in the world shows if you ask your kids about their homeworks, they're going to do a hell of a lot better. Can you please do that, okay? Will that help a little bit? I'd be surprised if it didn't, given the track record of that kind of program. But if you come to me and say, hey, look, here is how we can tie the money given to parents with their own performance and not with their kids and not whether their kids are going to starve or not, okay, but about them, then I'm willing to listen to it. Look, I agreed with welfare reform. Joseph Stiglitz, who is now considered some sort of, wild-eyed progressive in economic matters and want to regulate the banks, he's the one that helped Bill Clinton pass welfare reform. And you know what welfare reform was? Hey, listen, we want to give you a hand up, okay? And if you're in a bad spot, we want to help you to get you to a better place. But you've got to show me that you're actually looking for a job. And if you don't, well, then at some point I got to cap these or I got to cut it off. I think that's reasonable, and that's not to punish the poor. That's to give right incentives and disincentives. So I'm perfectly open to that. What I'm not open to is calling the poor and the middle class dogs and animals that shouldn't be allowed to breed and punishing their kids. That's the difference between Democrats and Republicans. I'm sure, given the state of the Republican Party, that this guy's running for governor, I'm sure Andre Bauer's status will be greatly improved by these comments. I'm not kidding. I'm sure he'll do much better among the Republican Party. They'll be like, oh, finally a guy who's not politically correct. I want to call the blacks, I mean the poor, animals that they are. You can tell I'm a little worked up about this story. You know what? This, by the way, is 10 times more immoral than what the governor, Mark Sanford of South Carolina, did. He goes and stoops his mistress in Argentina and lies about it. It's silly, it's fun, everybody's, got some giggles over it. I certainly did. But who cares? And we told you at the time, it doesn't really matter, okay? What matters is what you do and your actual policy in the state. All right. Okay, you know what? I'm going to do one more story about immorality now that I'm worked up. And this one's an international story, and it doesn't have anything to do with Democrats or Republicans, but it does have to do with right versus wrong, education versus ignorance. In Bangladesh, a 16-year-old girl got raped, and she was afraid to tell anybody because it would dishonor her that she got raped. Her parents tried to marry her off right after the rape before anybody found out and realized she wasn't a virgin anymore because someone had sexually assaulted her. Well, it turns out she got pregnant during the rape, and so they couldn't keep it a secret. People found out. Of course, her husband then immediately divorced her, okay? How dare she be raped before the marriage? So that her life is obviously ruined. But that wasn't enough for the good people of that particular area, and this was in the Brahmanbaria district of Bangladesh. And local Muslim elders got together, and they don't represent all of Islam, but apparently they do represent the local community there. And first they want to hear the case of the rape, so they brought in a 20-year-old villager who raped a girl, and of course they immediately let him go. They said that he, held no responsibility. Now, could they have thought maybe it's not, maybe they judged that it was not a rape, that she volunteered for it, and hence she had it coming, okay? But either way, the rapist got absolutely nothing, okay, from the story. And I'm getting this from the Telegraph, okay, so you know where to look it up. And then they bring in the girl. We can't prove necessarily rape against you because sometimes what they say is in Islam you need 4 witnesses to make sure it happened. No, really. So when you're getting raped, you should find 4 witnesses to make sure it happened. So we can't necessarily prove that the guy raped you, or maybe have absolutely no interest in proving that and don't give a damn about holding that man responsible. But instead, we're going to judge you because we can prove you're pregnant. So you must have had sex outside of marriage. They're going to give her 101 lashes. She's pregnant. They're going to whip her 101 times. I get so angry about that, I can't begin to tell you. You ignorant. All right, listen. More important than yelling at them, which I've done many, many times. Look, if you believe in God, He gave us free will so that we can choose to act morally or not. And then it's between us and God. If you take that choice away and you think you're going to compel people to act morally, you're doing a disservice to the will of God. because he gave us the free will. You can't take it away. You can't take away our morality, because without choice, there is no morality. And second of all, who the hell do you think you are? Do you think you're God? Do you think you're Allah? Did you talk to him? Are you a prophet? My understanding of Islam was that Muhammad was the last prophet of Allah. Not you, sitting in your village, deciding to give 101 whips lashes to a 16-year-old girl who got raped. How do you know that that's the will of God? Did you talk to him? Are you claiming you're a prophet? Is that what you're doing? Because that would seem to be very much against Islam. It depends on how you interpret the religion. And that there are evil, ignorant people all throughout the world who choose to interpret it in vicious ways. And we should not tolerate it. I have no understanding of their quote-unquote culture. I don't care to understand that culture. You know what it is? It's bathed in ignorance. And then there's people who genitally mutilate young women and say, oh no, it's my culture. My God told me, he whispered it in my ear. Again, I guess they're all prophets, right? They talk to God and he says, no, I got to mutilate this poor girl's genitalia. No, there is right and wrong in the world, okay? And your God doesn't determine what it is. His God doesn't. Her God doesn't. It is our collective reason and logic. We come, look at it, the facts, and together as a community we decide what is and is not reasonable, okay? We're not going to be decided by what you think God told you, okay? And we're not going to let you do this kind of violence and this sickness and depravity against women or men throughout the world because you think you talk to God. And right-wingers in this country say, oh, no, Cenk, oh, he's with the fundamentalist Muslims. Do I sound like I'm with the fundamentalist Muslims? The United States of America, if they can, I'm sure they can, and I'm sure there'll be 100 reasons why they can't do it, should give her immediate immunity. She should go to a U.S. embassy. They should make sure that she does not get, beaten like this, and that she comes here. Okay, look, there's a lot of things that the U.S. does wrong, and our right wing, does not go, quote unquote, this far, but they have their own twisted views of what God should do, and they have their own ways of inflicting violence through wars upon other people because of what they think their God should do, okay? But the one good thing about America is the founding fathers said that we shall not be ruled by any one man's religion. Even if you are religious, so is the other person and the third person, and they have different views, and I don't know who's God to listen to. So what we'll do in this country, in this great United States of America, is we will listen to reason and to our fellow men in a democracy. Now, some right-wingers in this country and some fundamentalist Christians in this country hate that, and they try to undermine it at all costs. It is our job to fight against them and to fight for people like this poor 16-year-old girl in Bangladesh, and to fight for education and understanding and facts and knowledge and against ignorance. Young Turks.
Payback! Payback!
All right, back on the Young Turks. Look, you know what? While I'm on a warpath, let me go to Beck. Let me explain to you what's going on there, and we'll talk to a guest about it later. So Glenn Beck has been hideous for a long, long time, and he's done a lot of crazy things, poured gas on somebody pretending that that's what Obama's doing and lighting them on fire. He didn't actually light them on fire. He's saying Obama would light them on fire. Many references to how Obama's going to come to get your guns, and he's a radical, he's a Marxist, etc. You have to be careful. He's going to change your way of life. Aren't you going to do something about it, etc.? Well, he's taking it to a new level now. He aired a documentary last Friday on how the progressives in this country are just like people who commit genocide, whether they're communist or fascist. It doesn't matter. It's all the same to them, and it's all progressives, apparently. Now, we're taking a clip here where he introduced the documentary, where he told us that it's coming up, because it gives us the best summary of the documentary. So we'll show you that clip, and then I'll come back and tell you exactly what Beck is up to here. Number 14. I'm sorry.
My keyword for me in this show this year is remember. And on Friday, we begin this process. I have a special Live Free or Die. It's my first documentary that I have produced. It details the events that most Americans have never even heard about. If you have heard about them, everything has been turned upside down by the progressive agenda. There are images that you will see on Friday that have, most of them, some of them you have seen, some of them I don't think have ever been seen on television anywhere on the globe. There are stories that most people either don't want to hear or don't want you to hear. I'm going to show you a quick preview, but I have to tell you, on Friday, you must DVR this program. Watch it without your small children, please. What you're going to see on Friday, some of it is extraordinarily disturbing.
As is Beck.
A lot of people seem to think that this concept of the gas chamber as a tool of social policy was invented by the Nazis. It wasn't.
To his places of work, to his places of recreation. We will attack the enemy wherever he lives. He preempted Al-Qaeda by 30, 40 years.
Within 1 year, several million people. I believe it is certainly comparable to the great genocides of the 20th century.
My family was in the living room watching television, and they see my grandfather. Of course, they're happy, to see him walking, and they realized that he was walking towards the wall.
It wasn't a mistake. It was intentional policy to exterminate people.
He said that his dream was to become a killing machine.
Our great teacher, great leader, Chairman Mao.
Planned and premeditated mass murder.
And nobody was interested in knowing about it.
If you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, your life does not benefit us, and it can't be of very much use to yourself.
This thing is going to turn, look out, it is the battlefield of ideas. This thing's going to open up the very gates of hell, and they're going to unleash on me on this one.
You know why? Because you're an idiot that bases nothing on facts or history, and you purposely set up things that make no sense and then go, oh, look at this, they will criticize me. Yeah, we're going to criticize you because in this documentary, he claims that Nazis are actually liberals. Nazis and fascists are the definition of the right wing. Now, it doesn't mean mainstream right wing, it doesn't mean the right wing in this country. But no reasonable human being, no one who understands history or political science in any way, shape, or form believes the Nazis or the fascists were on the left side of the spectrum. They were on the right side of the spectrum. Now, why does he do this? Something that he knows is patently false. Because he wants to blame all of the genocides on progressives and warn his listeners, and this is the most important part, that if you don't act, I mean, I don't know how, I guess you could act through the ballot box, but if you don't, I guess there are other ways to act. If you do not act, a genocide will happen in the United States of America. So he says over and over again, he uses it in the same sentence, progressive, communist, fascist. That's his way of referring to, I guess, liberals in America. Progressive, fascist, communist. Those three things have nothing to do with each other, except for the fact that Glenn Beck put them in one sentence together. But his idiot followers are like, oh my God, progressives and fascists and communists and genocide is coming. Hurry up, let's kill someone. Right? I mean, because if you thought there was a new Hitler, what would you do? If you were convinced that there was going to be a genocide in this country and that there was a new Hitler, what would you do? That is obviously where he's leading his followers. Now, number one, it's hideous because he's calling liberals Nazis, which is, and that they perpetrate genocides. Ridiculous. Number two, just as an aside, he says, oh, nobody knows about what Stalin did or what Mao did or what Che did. Every educated person knows about what they did. They're not progressives like progressives in America. They were dictators. You want to call them communists? Yes, they were on the left side of the spectrum. They were communists, but they have absolutely nothing to do with progressives in this country. Are you saying that because the Nazis were on the right side of the spectrum, that they perfectly represent the right wing in America? Is that the claim you're making? No, of course not, right? Nobody would say that other than Glenn Beck, except he says it about the liberals, right? It makes no sense. because Stalin was a ruthless, murdering dictator, and so was Mao, and Che killed a whole horde of people, and I've always been amazed that people wear the Che shirts. Because, look, you can argue about what he did, but he killed a whole hell of a lot of folks, okay? But now, like, it's as if Beck discovered it. He's like, did you know Mao killed a lot of people? Well, golly gee willikers, I didn't know that. Thanks for connecting him to Obama. And then, of course, he does this cute little rhetorical trick. The most dangerous part is he says, oh, no. It's actually the left that is so... He literally says, it is the left that has always committed violence. And in this country. In this country. So Scott Roeder, who killed the abortion doctor, he was a liberal? He was a progressive? Tim McVeigh, who blew up the Oklahoma City Federal Building, he was a progressive? He was a liberal? No, they were all right-wingers. The Olympic bomber, right-winger. And the list goes on, and I don't even know a single left-winger. I guess he has to go back to the Weathermen or the Weather Underground and whatever the hell thing he's pulling out of his ass from 4 decades ago, right? Because he has no recent examples, none. It's all right-wingers who do the violence. And then he claims, oh, no, we have to watch out for the left killing Obama. He said on multiple occasions, oh, the Secret Service, you know, I pray for them and I hope they're doing a good job because I bet the left will do some violence on Obama. Wink, wink. And, you know, I'll tell you, anyone in their right mind, seeing Obama's leading to genocide would do something. And then when one of his followers does something, he's going to say, oh, you see that? The left wing did it. I mean, it's a perfect setup. He's begging you to commit violence. He went from a stupid, funny clown, right? And he comes out in his red bulbous nose, and we all laughed, and we laughed, and we laughed, and we showed you the clips, and we're amused, to a really dangerous guy who's inciting significant violence in this country. And, you know, like rational people are going to look at this and go, oh, come on, man, nobody's going to act on that. But rational people don't act on that. Irrational people do. You know how many people listen and watch Glenn Beck? You think one of them is not mentally unstable enough to do something? Look at what they're doing in Montana now. Local militia leaders are putting out together a questionnaire for their politicians and demanding that they sign on to this questionnaire, okay? So what do they want? First of all, they're going to require federal employees to obtain written permission from the sheriff before approaching any local citizens. So, of course, as usual, here we go again. The federal government is the bad guys, and we have to do basically secession-like movements, okay? Now, as George Bush was trampling the Constitution, ripping through it, did anyone suggest violence on the left-hand side? No, no one, okay? Did anyone suggest that Massachusetts secede or California secede? No, no one, right? And if it was just a secession nonsense, okay, let the goofballs pretend they're going to secede in a county in Montana, right? No, the other part that they want is to be able to carry any kind of weapon they like. So you can hide the weapons. They could be fully automatic. They could be silencers. They can be machine guns. I don't know if they could be RPGs, but I'm sure that's next, right? So they want to get, and why? Because they're concerned. There's going to be a revolution in America. They heard it from Glenn Beck. There's going to be a revolution. They need to be armed. And what does Glenn Beck tell them every day? Oh, they're going to come for your weapons. They're going to come for your look, live free or die. Die, he says. Get ready to there's violence coming. Get ready. You got to act first. You got your machine guns. You got everything you need. You're going to let them take those guns away? Again, on multiple occasions, it is an absolute quote. Glenn Beck has said, I'd rather get shot in the forehead than let someone take my gun away. Wouldn't you? And then he'll come back and say, what? What do you mean violence? I just said that they were going to commit genocide and kill everybody and that everybody should grab their guns and do something about it. What do you mean violence? I didn't suggest any violence. This man is a psychopath. And he is going to get somebody to do something terrible. It makes me sick. Young Turks. All right, I'm about to make my ass-kicking bipartisan in a second. But before we get to that, let me do one more Republican on the idea behind the Republican Party, okay? So we have these guys who got to worry about, one, they don't give a damn about you and me. They care about, as we saw from the Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina, they care about their country club friends and whether they have to give a nickel or a dime to someone who needs help, somebody who's got a kid who can't eat, right? Whereas we give billions, trillions to the bankers, and Lieutenant Governor Bauer couldn't give a damn, right? So that's one part of it. And then you got the parts like Glenn Beck who are encouraging this violence throughout the country. And then the third part is people like John Cornyn, senator from Texas, who think, hey, you know what? The Republican Party stands to gain a lot from corporate America. And we love the idea that they can contribute more to our campaigns. So he's going to defend that Supreme Court decision that says, oh, yeah, it's open season. Corporate America can give as much money as they possibly want to any campaign. Now, any reasonable person knows that means they're going to buy those politicians. They can buy them on the right. They can buy them on the left. It doesn't matter. This ain't about liberal or conservative. This is about whether our democracy works and represents us or not. Now, no conservative should be on that side. Conservatives should not want their politicians to be bought by the bankers in this country or anybody in this country or corporations in this country. If you like corporations, great. But do you think they should buy our politicians? Hell no. Am I against Nike? No, I'm not against Nike. Do I want Nike buying my senators? No. Why would I want that? That's not a liberal or conservative position. And by the way, it's multinational corporations. And there was a great write-up over the weekend in a constitutional, a website concentrating on the Constitution that explained, yes, in fact, even Hugo Chavez can come into our local elections and say, yeah, you know what, I got Citgo, and that's a multinational corporation. Yeah, mainly owned by Venezuela, but that's okay. It's a multinational corporation, and I'm going to contribute, millions of dollars to any Democrat or Republican I like. Wait a minute, is the right wing in favor of Hugo Chavez buying our elections? How about some Saudi Arabian princes? Can they do it? Absolutely. That's what the Supreme Court opened up. Now, no one would defend that, right? Except, of course, John Cornyn, Republican of Texas, who's already bought by the corporations and can't wait to get more money siphoned off, not just to his campaign, but he knows in a battle between Republicans and Democrats to serve corporate America, the Republicans are going to win. That's what they've been doing for decades. So they will go to corporate America and say, give me all your money. And multinational corporations having nothing to do with America. Give me, give me, give me, give me. I'll be your butt boy, okay? I'll do whatever you tell me to do as long as you pay me. And the Supreme Court allows that to happen now through campaign ads. So Cornyn is going to go on television here and tell us, no, don't worry, everything will be all right. Now, the argument he uses makes no sense, and we'll tell you why after we watch this. Clip number 4.
What's the practical effect of the Supreme Court ruling this week saying that corporations can now openly support and spend money openly supporting or opposing candidates? Do you expect a rush of corporate cash into the campaign?
No, I don't. I think it's been overstated, the impact. Frankly, there's been an explosion of money into federal races for public office since, in the last 10 years, since campaign finance reform. It hadn't done anything to stop the flow of money in. What it's done is make it less transparent and less accountable. President Obama spent more money in his campaign in 2008 than Senator Kerry and President Bush did in 2004 combined. So what we need is transparency. We need contemporaneous reporting on the internet. I think that's the kind of accountability that we need.
Yeah, that makes no sense. One of the reasons that Obama had so much money is because corporate America gave it to him. So Cornyn's answer is, let's let corporate America give him more money. And whether he's a Democrat or a Republican. How's that the answer? That doesn't make any sense at all. So, you remember who the biggest donor for Barack Obama's campaign was? It wasn't you. It wasn't somebody sitting in Kentucky or Indiana or wherever. It was Goldman Sachs. We've talked about it on the show before. And Cornyn's genius idea is, let's take the reins off of Goldman Sachs, and instead of being able to give away about $1 million overall in different ways that they found to give under the limitations that currently exist, let's let them give $10 million or $100 million or $1 billion to any candidate they like. And you know what? You think, $1 billion, that's crazy, right? Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't Goldman Sachs buy the next president? If they spend $1 billion campaigning for one candidate or another in the next presidential election, they stand to make $10 million, $100 billion, $1 trillion. And these are not exaggerations. Through AIG's backdoor bailout, Goldman Sachs got a free $13 billion from the American taxpayer. Spending $1 billion of that to buy a president would be perfectly logical. They'd be crazy not to do it. And do you think anybody can compete against $1 billion worth of campaign ads? If I had that kind of money, I'd buy a president. You'd be crazy not to. And Cornyn says, oh, no, Barack Obama collected so much money from corporate America, so that proves that we need to raise more money from corporate America. And look, I don't want to be unfair to Obama. He collected a lot of money from small donations from people across the country, too. Okay, we were not his biggest donor, but it wound up helping him a lot. But Cornyn doesn't want to go in that direction. He thinks that's a pain in the ass. Then you got to actually appeal to Americans. No, he wants to just get it from corporate America. If you think the Republican Party's on your side, you're crazy. All right, now, that's the Republican Party. Let's turn to the Democratic Party. Now, Ben Bernanke, part and parcel of the people who destroyed this economy. The worst financial collapse in our lifetimes. Now, Barack Obama has reappointed him. Now, he's got a new populist turn. After the Massachusetts election, he's on the warpath against the banks, supposedly, right? But he still hasn't pulled Ben Bernanke, the guy who gave you the worldwide economic collapse, has been renominated. By the way, Ben Bernanke, bipartisanly idiotic, okay? Because that crash brought to you by the Republicans and Democrats. Remember, Ben Bernanke was not only appointed by George W. Bush, before that, he was in George W. Bush's administration. So you think he's a Democrat? He ain't a Democrat. He's a Republican. But now, because Obama's behind him, all of a sudden, the Democratic Party's supporting him. You know what happened today? John McCain came out and said, yeah, I'm against Bernanke. I'm going to vote down. And on the other side of the aisle, Tim Geithner and guess who, Rahm Emanuel, are going and lobbying every single Democratic senator. You better pass Bernanke. The stock market will crash if you don't. You better pass him. Oh, great. That's a great idea. After Massachusetts, what you should do is say that you're in favor of the establishment, you're in favor of the guys who collapsed the economy, you're in favor of Wall Street who loves Ben Bernanke, and John McCain and the Republicans are against him. You think that's smart politics? Let alone smart policy. All right, let's let the idiot speak for himself. Tim Geithner, clip number 8.
Mr. Secretary, what will happen if the Fed chairman, Ben Bernanke, doesn't get reconfirmed?
We're very confident that the chairman will be reconfirmed by the Senate, and we think it's very important he be reconfirmed by the Senate. He's done a remarkable job in helping steer this economy out of the Great Recession, and I think he'll play a very important role in helping in the success of our efforts to try to make sure that we are bringing this economy back to durable growth.
So why is he having such a tough time?
Well, you know, we're at a moment where people are incredibly angry and frustrated by what the damage this crisis caused, and you see that across the country, and it's perfectly understandable. And everybody involved in this effort is bearing a lot of the brunt of that frustration and anger.
Is there any way that this nomination could go down?
I don't believe so. Again, we're very confident that this will happen, and he will have the support he needs to get to continue in this important role.
And how worried are you about how the markets are going to react to this uncertainty about it? So many Democrats either coming against or not taking a stand.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think the markets would view this as a very troubling thing for the economy as a whole. But as I said, I don't think they should be uncertain. I think they can be confident because we're very confident he'll be confirmed.
You understand the same old game that's being played? You better fall in line. If you don't, the markets are going to crash. We're threatening you with the markets. Wall Street loves Ben Bernanke because he lets them take wild risks, make a lot of money, and then get taxpayer money. They love him. So you better listen to Wall Street. If you don't, we'll threaten you with a market crash. Okay? We're going to hold that over your head. And he's done a remarkable job of effing up the economy. His job was to regulate the banks so they didn't take that kind of risk, so they didn't lead to a collapse. Failure was only 100%. How much worse could he have done? The big credit for him is after the gigantic collapse of the economy, it didn't turn into a full-blown depression because of Ben Bernanke's genius. Where was his genius before the collapse? Oh, of course, there was nothing that could have been done. No one could have seen this coming. Now the Democrats are doing the old Condi Rice line. No one could have seen this coming. Hurricane Katrina, no one could have seen it coming. It was just on the Weather Channel that it was coming. And, of course, the final strategy is blame the voters. The voters are angry and frustrated, but, you know, they're irrational and emotional. You can't listen to them. They're not nearly as smart as Tim Geithner and Ben Bernanke, who caused the collapse in the first place. No, thank you. No, the problem isn't us. The problem is you, Tim Geithner, and your friend Ben Bernanke and the bankers he's protecting. Clip number 9.
Secretary, as you look back, do you think now that a year ago we should have just taken the stiff medicine and taken control of the bad banks?
No, I don't. I think that the strategy we adopted, which was designed to make sure that we brought capital back into the financial system so banks could lend again, was remarkably successful and bringing private capital in on a much larger scale, much more quickly than any of us anticipated. And that allowed us to bring a substantial measure of strength and stability to our financial system at much, much lower cost to the American taxpayer. As you know, the expected costs of this crisis are now dramatically lower than anybody predicted, more than $200 billion lower than what we anticipated a year ago. That is real resources that we can now use to meet the longer-term challenges we face in this country. So I think the strategy we adopted worked to a substantially greater extent than we thought, at much lower cost, much more quickly, and you can see the benefits today, not just in an economy that's growing, but in the cost of credit and the availability of credit to businesses across the country. Now, the financial system still has parts that are still quite damaged. If you're a small business in parts of the country, some industries, it's very hard to get credit. Small banks still face a lot of financial pressures. Housing markets are still under a lot of stress. And there are parts of the financial system that still need some reinforcement and help. But on the broad strategy to stabilize the economy at least cost to the taxpayer, the strategy the President adopted has been remarkably effective.
Man, he got a different definition of remarkably effective than I do, okay? But the thing is, that's literally true. Don't get angry at him. In Tim Geithner's mind, he thinks this recovery has been remarkably successful because he doesn't care about the 10% unemployment. He doesn't care that they're not lending the money. His definition of success is, are the banks back to making record profits? Check. The answer is yes. Mission accomplished. In Tim Geithner's worldview, well, if the banks are doing well and Wall Street's doing well and the stock market's doing well, I did my job. What are you guys all complaining about? I've been remarkably successful. By the way, none of those the things that he mentioned, like the cost of credit is back to where it needs to be, that's not true at all. You know that after the collapse, in order to be able to buy commercial property, you had to put down about, roughly, on average, about 30%. Now, that's a big number. Before the crash, you used to be able to put down less, right? And now you can make an argument that, hey, you know what? Maybe you should put down 30% to make sure that that is a less risky investment. There's a reasonable argument to be made there, right? Now, that slows down the economy, that slows down lending, because not a lot of people have 30% of enough money to cover for a commercial real estate venture. But it could be reasonable. You know what it is today? A year later, it's 50%. You have to put 50% down. You know who has 50%? No one. That's why nobody's lending any money. Nobody's doing new ventures. Okay? He thinks the problem is solved because the banks got the money and they didn't lend it out. What they did was they did more proprietary trading. They trade for themselves on derivatives and credit default swaps. And they're back to doing that same thing. So in Tim Geithner's worldview, everything's working just fine. Last Geithner clip. Let's squeeze it in. Clip number 10.
There are two types of alternative strategies people advocated at that time. One was to preemptively nationalize the largest banks in the world. That would have been incredibly expensive. As the advocates of that strategy acknowledged at the time, that could have cost trillions of dollars of the taxpayers' money and could have been much more damaging to basic confidence in the economy as a whole. Some people advocated we should stand back and let the crisis burn itself out. Let firms fail, essentially let them be liquidated. And we saw the kind of risks you face in that strategy after Lehman collapsed in the fall of 2008. That, of course, helped contribute to the worst financial crisis we'd seen in generations. And you saw the value of America's savings decline precipitously. You saw a generalized run on the financial system. You saw a run on money markets, commercial paper markets start to unravel. And you saw thousands of businesses fail that did not need to fail. You saw unemployment rise to unprecedented levels in the memory of most Americans. That was incredibly damaging. Neither of those two strategies would have been effective. They would have been much more damaging for the country. And I think the strategy we adopted has been very effective, as I said, at bringing more stability, more confidence, more availability of credit at a lower cost, at much lower cost to the American taxpayer than anybody expected.
Nonsense. He set up two straw men there. He blamed all the economic problems on the fact that they let Lehman collapse. It's like, look, the one investment bank, we didn't bail out, and you see what happened, 10% unemployment. No, those things are not necessarily causally related. You're blaming all the bad stuff on the one that you let go? Oh, please, okay? Did the collapse of Lehman cause a lot of problems? Yes, it did. But to blame the whole economic collapse on that is totally disingenuous. He can't possibly believe that. And then finally, he says, some people said nationalize the banks, and you see how that would have cost us trillions. Look, what we did was we put in all the money to the banks, and then we said to them, generally speaking, you keep all the profits if you recover. If you quote-unquote nationalize the banks, what would have happened is we put in the money and we get the profits out if they get back on their feet. Instead, we don't get any profits. They socialized the risk on us, and they kept the profits for themselves. Don't believe a word Geithner's saying. Young Turks. Thanks for watching the video podcast. Of course, if you go on our website, theyoungturks.com, you can get the whole 3-hour show.
Plus an uncensored post-game show.
That's if you become a member on theyoungturks.com.